Welcome to Pencils and Lipstick. This is a podcast for indie authors. I'm Kat Caldwell, novelist, short story writer, and book coach. Here on Pencils and Lipstick, we're obsessed with all things story, and it is my goal to bring you the writing tips that you need to make your novel come to life. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 259 of Pencils and Lipstick. I'm Kat Caldwell, and I am recording this just the day before it goes out because I am back from India. It's March 9th. We are all recovering from daylight savings time, and I hope you guys are doing well this week. This is the week that I will be getting back to writing. I have finally finished Across the English Channel, is what I will be calling Dowser. Dowser being the main character, and so I called it that for a long time. So finally finished it. Very excited about that, and I've been home for a week, and so this coming week is the week that I will really hunker down and move on to the next story, honestly. So if you guys are new to us, to the show, welcome. If you're not, thank you for continuing to listen. We mostly talk I mostly talk to indie authors. We talk about writing and publishing, and sometimes we interview people. So this week it is just me with you guys. As far as India went, it was amazing. I highly recommend it to anybody. I love that country. I was surprised that I loved it, honestly. Don't know why. Just never had like a burning desire to go to India. There's I don't know. I guess there's just other places I want to go, but I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Fell in love with the people and the food, especially. And I didn't get to see half of, all the touristy things that people get to see, but just had a wonderful, wonderful time. I was up in West Bengal, and so it's an area that takes a long time to get to. So that was pretty much where we were in the mountains. And the more time I spend in the mountains, honestly, the more I love the mountains. I just love the people. I love how humble they are and warm they are, and they just let you into their space and into their culture. And I found this in every country. Like, mountain people are just salt of the earth, and I love it. So I had a wonderful time. It did take me a while to recover, and just it's a lot of traveling, but I'm excited. Next week, I'm actually going to the Future of Publishing conference in New Orleans again this year. So I will let you guys know how that goes, what new things I learn. But if you're new, this is a great time for you to subscribe or to share the podcast. If you are looking for interviews, just the last couple of weeks, we've had a couple interviews with CC Tyler and Roland, and we've just had lots of interviews in this. Today, we are just going to kind of go back to basics as I jump into a new novel, and I had a couple emails this week I sent out in my newsletter. Just, what are the questions that you have? Kind of cheating on content ideas. I didn't really have the energy to brainstorm, so I asked, and a couple of people wrote back and said, just where do I start? And kind of affiliated with that was somebody who asked, where do I come up with another plot for my second book? And so we're gonna kind of review the key scenes that a novel has today. So it might be a little bit shorter today, but don't worry, we will be back with more interviews soon. It's going to be pretty cool. We have some really fun people coming up, and fun kind of announcements that are happening in the indie world. At least I found them to be new. So yeah, stick around. We are going to go into the key scenes of novels. So yes, if you are listening and you would prefer to see me or my guests, you can go to YouTube at Pencils and Lipstick and find us there. It's pretty easy to find us. We are on all apps. I always say we because I just include all of you who listen. I feel like you guys are part of this podcast as well. You've been with me for almost, 6 whole years. So that's pretty cool. So when we're talking about starting a new story, a new novel, or if you are, you kind of maybe have an inkling of a book that you want to write, or inkling of a character that you want to write. We have talked to a couple of different people in the past few weeks that have challenged possibly your idea of writing a story, or where to start to write the story. We talked to Cece Tyler about like having grace for the messy first draft in a way that um, I don't think a lot of people have talked about. And that was just last week, if you want to go listen to that. And she was saying like, just you don't have it all figured out. It's impossible to have it figured out in the first draft. And she's not the only one that says that. A couple of people have talked to me over the years, Beth Barani, um, and who was it? It was Janice as well, that were just like, yeah, it's impossible to understand everything about your characters or everything about your plot before the first draft. And so maybe as outliners, if you're listening and you're an outliner, maybe that makes you cringe a little bit. But I think it's true even probably for outliners, although I'm not a great outliner. So I'm kind of assuming here, but I think it's impossible to know everything until you start writing. I don't know. Maybe that will come to us one day when we've written 70 books, like, Stephen King, whatever. But right now, if you're just starting out or you just have one book under your belt, sometimes it can feel hard to start that book again and understand where to go. Now, as a discovery writer, there are times like with Bend and Loyalty that it took me forever to really figure out what the story was. I knew that I wanted a musician who had to go back home, had to figure things out, and that his mom was kind of, problematic, and that I wanted the brother to betray, the twin to betray my main character Tristan. His name was Talon at that point. And so I had concepts of this story, and so I assume that you have concepts of your story as well. And so you do have to start out with a concept of the story, and that is kind of one of the first places that you start, at least to give you a place to start. And if you don't have a concept of a story, if you just sort of have a character, I would suggest either reading books or reading the newspaper, and maybe skip like today's news or whatever, and go to the true crime section or the sports section or the celebrity gossip section, and read what's going on there. Maybe watch a couple documentaries, get your juices flowing, and but to see like what else you can come up with. But most likely you have at least the genre of the story that you're going to write. So if it's crime, probably going to the crime area or those crime stories and see like what's happening. Maybe look up the newspaper in some other country. Maybe that would be less anxiety inducing. See what's happening in the Caribbean, what's happening so far, what's happening in France, what's happening in India, like what's the celebrity gossip over there. What if that just sparks your interest, and you like your curiosity, and ooh, I could do this, and I could mesh this character with that story. A lot of times I think when we feel kind of at the end of our creativity and finding those stories, we might need a break. I mean, I just went to India, I got a little bit of break, and it's funny, somebody asked me, are you going to, are all of our sort of experiences where we're climbing up these mountains and we're falling and we're, having sort of these, we had to sleep through a rainstorm, are these going to end up in your book? And I said, honestly, I don't know, because when I come on a missions trip, I'm just in the moment. I'm really focused on being in the moment. And of course, everything in my life, pushes me towards another story, right? So I don't know if it will end up in a story, but I do know that my brain got a break. And so it is possible that your brain just needs a break. You need to do something for fun. You need to just take a rest, right? But you do need a sort of concept of the story. Let's say, you want to write a crime story in which, this mail worker doesn't know it, but they, find let's see, they find a package and it looks like it might be money and it's been returned 3 times and they decide to take it and they don't know it, but it's actually, like the mafia's money. I don't know. And now they've got to escape the mafia. At least you have that part, right? Now you have to figure out who the protagonist is. Now, again, as we have talked about before, it's kind of hard to know exactly who this protagonist is. And so this might take a little bit of thought. This depends on kind of how you write. I think for plotters, the protagonists are a bit harder. And for like character first people, the plot is harder, right? And so let's go into whatever is easiest for you then. So if plot is easy, once you kind of have that first seed of a concept, sit down and really think through your plot. And then you can come up with a character that can be in that plot, right? If you're a character first, come up with your character, who they are, what they're doing, where they are, what their main goal is going to be in this plot. And then you're going to have to sort of figure out the plot. So what we do need to figure out from the beginning, even if you don't know the depths of this character, are your protagonist goals. So let's say this person's goal is to one day get a better job and pay off their debt. Pretty easy, right? We don't quite know what the debt is or where that came from yet. Their goal is to pay off the debt. Maybe they're taking overtime, or maybe this is a second job. They're not a mail carrier, but this is a second job. And they see the opportunity. And now, wow, they don't need to work a second job for 5 more years. They could just take this money that's been returned, right? Nobody's laying claim to it. It's almost like lost. It's almost like finders keepers, and they can take it and they can pay off their debt and be done, right? So there you go. Maybe we got a goal there already. Maybe your protagonist goal is to get into college. Maybe your protagonist goal is to find a husband. Maybe your protagonist goal is to, I don't know, get rise in their business, take their boss's job. I don't know. Maybe the protagonist goal is to find the cure for their sick kid. I don't know I mean, there are, kind of that main goal of the book. And what you do have to understand, as kind of a new writer, is that the main goal of the character, it kind of it pushes the character, right? But it doesn't have to be the main goal of the plot. Like the plot can actually sort of move around them, right? So you could have like the main goal of the character is he's a guy and he's going to go rescue his daughter who's made the choice to like move to rural Spain and buy a village and like create her own like retreat center there. I don't know. And she's escaping some, hurt in her life. And so he's going to go rescue her from that. That's his goal, to rescue his daughter from Spain. I don't know who needs rescuing from Spain. seems like a great place to go. I love Spain. So, but then the plot around that could be, I kind of saw this like preview on Netflix, and I'm not sure that this is the whole story. But and then he, the plot is like a love story, and he falls in love with a Spanish woman, and he, decides to stay in Spain. Funny. That would be funny if like the daughter decides to go back and he decides to stay. I don't know. So you see how like the plot doesn't have to kind of go, sometimes it's really integrated and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is, this person is trying to pay off their debt and then aliens come and things are happening and they sort of move through it and they figure out how to, they get like awarded $1 million by the president and then, their goal gets paid off, whatever. So your beginning goal doesn't always have to be like super integrated into the plot, but it will eventually, it has to be part of the character, right? But a lot of times what takes a lot more time is kind of the need of the character and their underlying flaw. Now, this might take a rough draft to write out. Like, what does the character actually need to do? What do they need to do to grow? What do they need to change about themselves? And again, if you're not character driven at first, if you're more plot driven, this actually might take writing an entire manuscript. So if you know the plot, you're going to need to go forward and kind of write the character, because what we're talking about here in their need is their the internal change that needs to change in order for the reader to be satisfied that there was a full character arc. Okay. So just be careful with thinking that it's mandatory that you have all these things together before you start writing, because it's not. Now, in order to start writing, you have to have some sort of scene to start writing, right? So I can suggest that you write the ending. Do you know what the ending is? Does the person like become part of the mafia? Maybe they accept a role in the mafia. Maybe they realize that the mafia is actually their granddad. I don't know. Does the man fall in love with the Spanish woman? I think the Netflix movie is like Italian though. I can't, whatever. If you've like watched Netflix romance, you probably know what preview I've seen. So do they fall in love and does he stay? You know, you can write that scene. Do you know more the beginning? Write that scene. Do you want to write just like introducing the character to the reader? This might not end up in the story, by the way, but you could write out sort of this, this character walks onto the scene, like they're walking in their garden, they're walking into work. Get to know this character, right? Whatever place you want to start. You do kind of have to have, so the 10 key scenes of a novel, like we haven't even got to that part, right? We are just kind of talking about the beginning part, but this does bring us to the first key scene, which is kind of the opening or the hook. This depends on your genre. All right. A lot of genres that are fast-paced, thrillers, mysteries, some sci-fi, some fantasy, they really start with a bang. Some romance has started to do this, really like boom, you're in it. You start with dialogue or you start with action. And this is sort of the hook, you draw that reader in right away. Other literary or women's fiction might start out with more description of where they are, or the just a little bit slower. So like your first scenes of the book are drawing the reader in and just the opening, this blossom of a book opening towards the reader and introducing the reader to the concept of the book, right? But pretty quickly you need the disturbance, right? Or the whatever happens to start twisting the character, right? This is, I mean, lots of people say it's like should be right away, it should be pretty soon, it should be 10%, it should be 15%. I don't know if you're, should be really concerned about that right now. It should be happening pretty soon. You could start writing if you understand the moment that is really going to push that character into movement. And so, how Harry Potter, at least the movie, I don't remember the book, it starts out with sort of showing how the baby shows up, and he's like, he goes to his aunt and uncle, right? Let's see if I remember this right. And then kind of the disturbance or like that push scene is when, I don't remember the giant's name, comes and he's like, "You're a wizard, Harry. You should be going to wizard school." So that's not the very first scene that you see. You have more of a setup. And then like the scene's line is pretty famous because it is that like that boom, that crackle, that like, oh, something's happening. This is where it's going to get good now. You're a wizard. Let's go. Here's the beginning of your new kind of life and your new journey, right? This character is going in a new direction, as a lot of people say, right? So those so right there we have two key scenes, the hook. And when I say scene, it could be more than a scene. Usually kind of that push moment is one scene, but the opening setup could be more than one scene. Then you have maybe you have to introduce the antagonist. In romance, actually, your antagonist is the love interest because there's usually some sort of friction there, right? Harry has to meet that one blonde kid who is an antagonist, and then eventually, he meets other antagonists, professors that he doesn't like. I don't know what. I can't remember this. Maybe the antagonist is like the permit guy or the boss that doesn't think they can do it, right? Or the organization or the government that doesn't think that this group of people can do it or this person can do it. What's that, G.I. Jane? Like she's going up the entire against the whole Marines. No one thinks she can do it, right? So you kind of have to introduce the opposition. Can you start with writing that scene? The opposition. Um, Usually you're going to have a twist, and um, don't don't sort of wince away from that word. Twist is a complication. What's happening? One of my friends wrote a great fun romance where the protagonist is building, like, kind of redoing this old farm for a bed and breakfast, and a complication shows up by this guy coming into town and wanting to buy all the land everywhere because he needs it for, I think, for his company. A complication could be that the permit isn't coming in. A complication could be that she didn't do the permits well, or that her taxes weren't done well, or that a fungus comes and kills all the plants, right? Like a twist or a complication could be something small like that. A twist and a complication could be the the mafia or the bank sees that you're paying off your loan with like marked bills. I don't know. That's a pretty big complication. And now you're dealing with the cop, that's going to come after you and thinks you're in the mob. That might be cool. So you see how sometimes these things can kind of, like, it's hard to say where they come. Like if you're doing that, like what if this person finds the package and they go pay off their loan with marked bills, and now they, are visited by the attorney general, they meet the cop, so now they're meeting their antagonist right there, so it's not always like meet the antagonist, you know but as a writer, you could have the reader meet the antagonist before, if you're having like dual point of view. Okay, so the reader could meet the antagonist before the actual protagonist does. Does that make sense? All right, so the midpoint is the next key scene. And that is usually, some things are going pretty well. But what's really important is that there is no really going back. Like life has changed enough. Okay. So let's say this person is stuck now working with the attorney general or the cops or whatever. I think those words are correct. To infiltrate the mob. Like there's really kind of no going back because they're like, hey, you either go to jail for this money that makes you look like you're a mafia person, or you work with us. Let's say, oh, I have now fallen in love with this guy or had a one night stand with this guy. And now he's like a problem to my business goals. Like there's no going back from that. You can't go backwards and like not sleep with him, right? Whatever that midpoint is, kind of where the character realizes, okay, life has kind of changed and we gotta accept it and move forward, right? So the next key scene, after once they sort of realize that, is usually when the opposition attacks a little, or the opposition, maybe in a romance, like maybe they step back, like the love interest sort of gets cold feet. But the person who is pushing your main character into through this story and really going to be the person who pushes the character to have their full character arc really comes at them. So let's say this, I think what happens in my friend's book is he comes back with all the permits, and because he is from a big company and he kind of has influence, he gets his way, but then realizes that he's like in love with her, and like that's not a great thing. He's not going to get the girl if he like steals her land, but he kind of decides to go full force and maybe maybe it's not love, maybe it was just lust and he's going to try to do this, and then so he makes the decision to go full force, right? So start thinking a little bit about what your antagonist is going to do, and a lot of times people find this more fun. But again, please remember that we're going through these pretty quickly, and if you're not an outliner, it's hard to kind of see that right now, right? It's kind of hard to see what that might look like right now. But you can take notes, and just say, okay, I'm just going to need to understand. I need the villain to really be proactive in this book. That is one thing that I see editing sometimes, is if you don't make your villain proactive and really push the main character, a lot of times it becomes a villain for villain's sake, right? Or evil for evil's sake. And some readers will look past that, but some readers won't. And then they'll review it in that sense, right? And we want to avoid that. Usually there is a twist. So number 7, there's another twist at this point. So the protagonists has realized they're kind of in it. They're at this midpoint. They got to keep going forward. And there's usually some sort of twist. Some other thing happens, and a reversal, a betrayal, a complication. One more layer is happening. Maybe, and do be careful with twists that they don't just come out of nowhere. Now, let's give ourselves some grace with the messy first draft. They can come out of nowhere in the first draft, but you should continue to be thinking about, okay, maybe that was out of nowhere. Maybe that doesn't make sense. I really do want this to make sense. What is something that could push this character, complicate really what this character is going through, betray this character? And as you get to know that main character and the villain, or the antagonist, you can really start to see what kind of twist is going to make more sense, the most sense to the reader and to you. Okay. Don't forget about the dark night of the soul. This is when the character thinks all is lost. I like talking about dark night of the soul because sometimes people avoid writing it, and you really don't want to avoid writing it. This is when your character is really faced with who they are and what is going to be required of them to move forward and to be a better person, let's say. Because we all have choices, right? Even in our stories. And so typically we're writing human or human characteristic, personified animals or something in our stories, but let's just say humans, and they have choices to make. And so they can choose to move through this plot and not change at all, or they can choose to move through this plot and come out of it kind of the person that they were meant to be. Okay. So if they choose not to change, be very careful with that. Most books have characters in which they choose to change. So we'll go with that. The dark night of the soul, this is kind of when the best friend lets the antagonist know that they're actually kind of a jerk. That's one of my favorite is, oh my gosh, it's the Vince Vaughn and Jennifer Aniston movie, The Breakup. When Vince Vaughn is in his friend's bar and he's kind of like, I did everything that I could to fix this relationship. And his friend was like, no, you didn't. And his friend tells him flat out, we all knew this wasn't going to work. Like, what do you mean? We were the perfect couple. No, you weren't, because you're selfish. Because we do things that you want to do, because you only think about you. Like, this is his best friend talking, right? And this forces Vince Vaughn to realize he has a choice. He can take this information and realize that everyone's been trying to tell him this whole time and giving him opportunities to change. He can either change or he can keep going and keep ruining his life, right? So there are all these times, all these moments, these are usually the big speech moments, and, like what stirs the reader and stirs the people around them. the dark night of the soul, they think everything is lost. Um, and then somebody comes and says, you're down because you have a problem. Now, there are times that your protagonist can figure this out themselves. They can just sort of sit in their misery and then figure out that they have to get out of their misery. That's fine as well. And this is going to push them into the climax of the story, right? The climax is not in the middle. The climax is kind of 75% to 80% to the end. The climax is when the main character reaches their goal or reaches their new goal, realizes really who they are. They do the thing that they need to do to become the person they were meant to be. So that will depend on your genre. They get the bad guy. They prove to the boss they're better. They prove that they're innocent. They become the mafia, the head of the mafia. They get the guy, they get the girl, whatever that is. They become the person, in a romance, it's like they become the person that they're supposed to be for that guy or the girl lots of times. And then the other key scenes is usually the denouement, the end, the resolution, the new world order kind of what is going to happen, what their world looks like now that they have changed, that they have gone through this whole story, the end results of that push and this new thing, this new path, right? And how the world is different now. I think the first Harry Potter book, it's kind of like it solidifies Ron and Hermione and Harry's friendship, right? There's always sort of, even if you're writing a series, there's the world has sort of clicked into a new path, right? So those are kind of like the way that a novel is set up. Now, again, starting to write your book, you can choose any of these moments really to start writing. If you are a plot person, get excited and write the most exciting part. Maybe it's the climax. Maybe it is the dark night of the soul. Maybe it's the twist. Maybe you can come up with a couple twists and write out the scenes and see what they look like or feel like. Whatever gets you excited, honestly. Maybe you should write the ending. A lot of times people do very well with having an ending written in mind. I did this for a couple of my books, actually. The endings did always change, but the idea, like, it's like the setting of the ending changed, but the feeling of the ending did not change. And having written the ending gave me something to move towards, and it made sure that I didn't get lost along the way as I continued to write, right? Now, you guys, you can really start anywhere. You can start by writing out, who do you think your character is? Maybe you don't even start the book yet, but you're just kind of writing out what you think the character is. Maybe you want to write through these key scenes and say, let's brainstorm. What could the midpoints be? That part where the character, can't really go back. What could those midpoints be? And start just coming up with ideas. A lot about writing, as I say a lot, but I will say this again, especially to new people, you will write more words than will go into your book. It requires a lot of thinking. And it requires writing that will get so changed or will get tossed. Whether it is just writing out character exposés, like what are they doing, writing out plot outlines, writing out brainstorming moments, go ahead, read things, watch things, get your energy juices moving. And a lot of times, if you feel blocked, a lot of times setting a timer, removing all distractions and just finding, the pinch point, the first pinch point, the opposition comes in. Who's the opposition? What are they doing? What do they want? What do they act like? Let's write, how many different kinds of scenes can I write? They're really pushy. They're not pushy at all. Who are they and what do they look like? And just write, just brainstorm. What is the thing that pushes the protagonist into their new path? What would that be? What is that disturbance? What is that, what is going to happen to them to make them, make this decision to change? Isn't it in Star Wars where Luke Skywalker, like his aunt and uncle get blown up and the farm gets blown up and he gets this like halogen thing, whatever message that says come here, and he goes, okay. He has this whole his whole life gets turned upside down. So what is this thing that is going to shake this your protagonist awake enough to take this road less taken? Brainstorm that a couple, write it out. Spend 20 minutes, 2 days brainstorming, writing down whatever thoughts that come to you. And again, like, go out, read some things, maybe other countries news. Maybe it's easier to, I say that because it's easier to read articles than it's quicker to read articles than it is to read books. Watch some movies, watch some shows, see what grabs your attention. Just don't do it instead of writing. So it really doesn't matter where you start, it just matters that you start. Right. So I give you permission to start on whatever scene it is, whatever brainstorming moment that you want to take, um, whether it's plot driven, whether it's character driven, whatever it is. And I give you permission to just start on the messy draft, because it is going to be messy. I toss probably 50,000 words every book, because it's just getting into it, seeing what could happen. What about this? What about that? Okay. Until you sort of peel away the layers and find the real core of the story, right? So it is okay to just start writing and realize that what you write today doesn't have to be in the final book. All right. So I hope that helped you guys a little bit of a review this week. I will be back next week for episode 260 of Pencils and Lipstick. Be sure to subscribe and share and all the things. You can find me on Instagram at @CatCaldwell_writing or author_CatCaldwell. You can join my newsletter. All of those links are in the show notes below. And you can get even more information from my newsletter or the Substack to keep you busy. And if you're new here, be sure to go back and listen to the last few episodes. I think you're going to get a lot of good stuff from them. All right. Until next week, guys. Bye.